Anxiety disorders are the most common mental disorders worldwide, affecting about 300 million people around the globe. I speak to a psychologist and researcher who is studying fear and anxiety around social interactions and what people can do about it. Meet Dr. Fallon Goodman.
Dr. Goodman is a professor of psychology at George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Talk to me about the progression of studying this, understanding it, and you coming into this field. What lured you into it?
You know, we moved recently. We bought a house a few months ago, and one of the things about moving is you uncover things you didn't realize you had. I found my middle school journal, which I regret keeping, and I think I regret more when I opened it up, and I saw that I was a really lonely teenager. I was lonely for much of my high school and young adulthood, middle school and high school. And looking back at what I wrote, something I really struggled with was trying to understand how I had a relatively large and stable social network in my classmates, and I played soccer with my teammates. I still felt so alone. I felt like I not only didn't belong, but that I couldn't belong. And when I got to college and really did some painful and honest reflection, I thought, there's gotta be more to building social, like what are the reasons that people cannot connect when they have every opportunity to do so? And what I learned in a few seconds of a Google search is one of the biggest barriers to building social relationships is social anxiety. And what I quickly learned thereafter, it's one of the most treatable. We can pretty easily and effectively treat social anxiety. So I thought, all of these people are suffering. Like, life is hard enough. And people are suffering with an anxiety condition that is treatable and that is preventing them from building social relationships, which is one of the most fundamental things for well-being. And so that early on in college really kicked off the trajectory of my career.
Dr. Goodman directs George Washington University's Emotion and Resilience Laboratory.
At its core, social anxiety is about the fear of being rejected. When we feel socially anxious, we become hyper-focused on how we are appearing to others.
Her research focuses on how people form social connections and build resilience in the face of adversity.
People struggling with it, I think the general public would say, oh, well, they're just kind of reclusive. They want to be by themselves. But that's one of the things you point out. It's not. People need human connection.
This is a fundamental misunderstanding about social anxiety. It is not about a preference. When we think about preference for socializing, it's more akin to introversion. In general, if you're introverted, you prefer less frequent social interactions and maybe smaller, more quiet settings. Anxiety is about a fear of the social interaction, a fear of the evaluation and rejection. And what we find in research in my lab is that when we follow people with social anxiety disorder throughout their days, they are happier when they are with other people socializing than when they are alone. This is a pretty phenomenal thing. So I don't know if you have any phobias. I don't like bridges. When I am on a bridge, I am not happy. I am terrified. I want for every fiber in me to get on the ground. When people with social anxiety are in the face of the thing that they fear most, the thing that is causing them mental illness, they feel better than when they are alone, better in the sense of more positive emotions, which speaks to the power of social connection. We as humans, whether we like it or not, are social interdependent creatures, and we get a lot of joy and positivity from being in social interactions and building those social relationships. And that is true even for people who are their mental illness is defined by a fear of socializing.
One of the things in your talk that really kind of jumps out at me, and I wrote it down, this woman said, what is your function in life? And she said to avoid being noticed by other people. And I thought, oh my God. But there are people who feel that way.
Most people with social anxiety can trace it back to a moment in time where they were rejected. They were humiliated, it was on the playground, they were bullied, a romantic interest said, nah, you're not for me. And in those moments, there are choice points. You could choose to never go on a date again, and for some people, that might be preferable. But for most people, they're on a date because they want a romantic relationship. And so you want to choose the thing that is important to you and not make decisions based on your anxiety. And that's really where social anxiety gets problematic. When the decisions you're making are not about the things that are important to you, not about what you care about or what you want in your life, but about avoiding feeling anxious and avoiding that feared outcome of rejection. And in that rejection, the implicit message is you are not worthy. Whether you're not attractive enough or intelligent enough or funny enough, you are in some way not worthy of me, of this relationship. That is a really painful experience for anyone to go through. And it's so easy to then not put yourself back out there. And the idea that you're going to look at it as an experiment is usually what we want people to ultimately get to. But that's really hard. After that moment, it's hard to just get back out there.
Even though there are highly effective treatments for anxiety disorders, only 1 in 4 people are receiving treatments for it. That's according to the World Health Organization.
You know, my progression of studying social anxiety, I first really wanted to understand what are the daily experiences that a person with social anxiety lives with. What my lab is doing is we talk a lot about social anxiety being a fear of rejection. Now the question we're asking is, well, what happens when people are rejected? A surprising finding is that people feel rejected a lot of the time. In our recent data, across a couple hundred people, about 1/3 of the time that we asked them, people felt rejected. And I want to know, what is the best way to cope with rejection? When that worst fear comes true, what are people doing to feel better? What are people doing to quickly recover and move along with their day and their life?
And what are suggestions? I mean, like, let's say I deal with rejection today and it's devastating. What would you recommend?
The first thing is to take a step back and evaluate the situation as objectively as possible. This might require you asking a friend or a loved one, hey, look, this is what happened, what do you think? At that point, you ask yourself, well, how bad was it? If it was really bad, well, then let's talk about how to deal with that. If it wasn't that bad, then you've already sort of coped with it by saying, in the moment it felt horrible, but my life wasn't fundamentally altered. Or maybe there's a silver lining here. But if it really was awful, then that's where you start to move towards some acceptance, and that's a harder path. Your friend was rejected from the person he wants to date. That's horrible. Sit with that emotion, let it be what it is, and then return to your values of, is it important enough for me to continue dating? Is it important enough for me to find a job so I'm going to apply to another one? And that's where you really want to anchor your decisions to your values, not your anxiety.
Talk to me about, for you, the joy of working in the lab.
I mean, my joy in my job is mentoring. I love nothing more than working with my students on their research projects. Someone asked me recently, what paper are you most proud of? And I said, whatever my students have accomplished, because for me, mentorship was so important to navigate research, to navigate college. And so that's what brings me joy. A lot of the questions we study about social anxiety, we try to ask the simple but impactful questions, like, when are you happiest? When you're with others or when you're alone? How do you deal with rejection when it comes up? And if we can ask the questions that can lead to answers that can directly impact people's life, then I feel like I've done my job.
Social anxiety is becoming more of a mainstream topic as several high-profile athletes and performers have shared their own struggles. In 2021, tennis star Naomi Osaka withdrew from the French Open a day after she was fined by tennis officials for refusing to do media interviews. In her statement, Osaka said she was often racked by, quote, huge waves of anxiety before talking to the media.
You know, I think a lot of people don't think of this as like, wow, I had no idea there were millions of people out there dealing with this. Talk to us about some of these relatively famous individuals who are now stepping forward and saying, look, I'm struggling with this. And you cite various examples in your talk. Can you walk us through some of the people that just would jump out at us right away?
Naomi Osaka, I think, has been the most vocal in describing her social anxiety. She has said that things like giving conversations to reporters give her a lot of social anxiety. She's gotten pretty brutally criticized and said, well, how can you have social anxiety if you're also a Grand Slam champion, you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated in a swimsuit, you're leading a fashion campaign with Nike? How could you be so anxious that you can't do your job and talk to reporters? And what she has done so well and so courageously explained is that her social anxiety doesn't come out necessarily when she's performing on the tennis court. Maybe that's even a safe haven for her where she can just get in the zone and be in the moment. It's interacting with people in terms of strangers and conversations. We were just talking about Viola Davis. Her job is to perform as an actress, is to be vulnerable, to embody other people on television, live TV, film, where she's putting every piece of herself out for the world to judge and criticize. And yet she has talked about how she struggles with social anxiety.
One of the examples is running back Ricky Williams. And I remember when he was, during his playing days, an amazing running back, but everyone was always criticizing him and saying, oh, he's just a pothead and he's a mess. And I don't think they knew his backstory.
I mean, first of all, it's a good example of a man talking about anxiety and mental illness in general. Oftentimes, it's, more often than not, it's a woman talking about it. Ricky Williams is a great example because he's playing a sport where physical strength is one of the things that makes you great. And oftentimes mental illness is equated with weakness. So sharing that might convey that he is a weak person. And it's in fact the opposite. Those who are courageous enough to talk about what they're struggling with, those are the strongest people, because we're all struggling in some way. And he is willing now to use his platform to talk about it. But what struck me with his story that he shared is his social anxiety was so bad that he felt anxious talking to his own daughter. I'm a new mom, a little 5-month-old, and thinking about my anxiety getting in the way of building a relationship with her makes me want to cry. And he's sharing this publicly and saying, this is what social anxiety could look like. This is how bad it could be without treatment. And now he's become, an important spokesperson for social anxiety.
Technology has had a mixed effect on the mental health of young people, according to a 2022 report by the Pew Research Center. Although a hyper-connected reality has created new anxieties, 80% of the teens surveyed said social media made them feel more connected to what was going on in their friends' lives.
I'm just also wondering about technology in recent years. And I mean, obviously it's been, last 20 years or so, but the internet's become such a big part of our lives. Then Facebook becomes a big part of our lives. Then all the social media. But we also know that people can say the meanest things in the world online, whereas I would never say anything to your face, but I can get on there and I can type something. And so that thought of being rejected, I think in this cauldron that we live in, where you're on social media and everybody's like being mean to one another, does that also fuel this in some respects?
Sure. I mean, now the thing about something like social media is we don't really know the impact of anything we share or post. We can get likes and comments, but there's always a built-in uncertainty. There's always a sense of, well, when I post that picture, what are people actually thinking? And are they going to reject me? So there's the maybe subtle rejection. Then there's also what you mentioned of cruel, overt rejection, where people feel safer to say discriminatory or hurtful things behind a computer. And so when you see that rejection so often, not even if you experience it, but you see it right there, you think, ooh, I don't want to experience that. And it can make people increasingly withdraw. They start to see that their feared outcome is lurking right around the corner. And why should I then it's not worth it to put myself out there knowing how cruel and hurtful people can be. The thing about social media, though, is people have strong opinions on this, and there's certainly a lot of negative effects of social media, But for certain people, especially those who are more shy or vulnerable, there's also a sense of community, of finding your tribe online. You might be isolated, but you have friends that you can connect with on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, and you can feel like you belong, even if it's in an online community.
I saw you in a podcast talking about anxiety, and I loved how you described it, that if you're going into a meeting with your boss and you have anxiety, it's because it's important. Can you talk about that distinction?
Yeah, if something's not important to you, you're probably not going to worry about it very much. I think college students maybe can relate most to this. They show up to a class, they show up to a test. If they're not worried about it, they're going to fill in their bubbles and they're going to leave. But when things matter to us, it's a very normal response to feel anxious before an interview, a sporting event. Kind of using that anxiety to pump yourself up or get ready for the event is quite helpful. And so thinking about social anxiety, social relationships matter to us, and the consequences of not having them, the consequences of being isolated, are pretty profound. You cannot be involved in a social group, in a community, you're ousted from your family. Those are pretty devastating experiences. And so it makes sense that people feel anxious about being included. But if you think about a situation that doesn't matter to you, you're going to a coffee shop, you're ordering a latte, and you don't really care about whether or not you connect with the barista, you're probably not going to feel anxious about it.
Any words of advice for folks as they listen to you? What are some things that you should do to prepare beforehand so that you can deal with the devastation if it comes?
The first thing is to expect that you will not be perfect and you will mess up. Because I think one of the things with social anxiety is you're so worried about performing that when things inevitably don't go as planned, there's panic. Social interactions can go well even if they're not perfect. So remind yourself that you might do poorly and you might get rejected. A second thing, which sounds so simplistic but is quite powerful, is to physically calm your body down. And you can do that with taking 3 to 5 deep breaths. Kind of getting your mind and body ready to go. Once you're in the situation, when you're feeling socially anxious, we turn our spotlight inward. We think, how am I speaking? How am I sounding? What are they thinking? As best you can, focus your attention outward. What is the person doing with their eyes, their mouth, their ears, their nose? How can I focus on what they're saying and not how I'm feeling? And then after the situation, the rumination will really kick in. And that's where you can give yourself an honest, objective assessment. How did it really go? What did I really say? And when you identify things that didn't go as planned, you then again ask yourself, how bad was that really?
Can we turn the corner on this? Is this something that we know that is prevalent with millions of people? Is it something that, do you feel like the glass is half full?
I feel like I enjoy studying anxiety disorders because they are one of the most treatable mental health conditions. We have tried and true tools that work. I have worked with so many different types of people with social anxiety, from a 5-year-old to someone in their 70s. And every single time, if they're putting in the effort, which is hard, they get better. They get better with exposure, they get better with challenging their thoughts, with doing some social skills work and practice. People get better. And it's not easy. It's hard work, and that feared outcome of rejection might happen. I mean, it's probably going to happen. It's likely to. But on the other side of that is a life that's rich and filled with positive experiences and wonderful social relationships that can lead to a life that feels so much more full than a life of isolation or fearing those social relationships.
We'll leave it at that. That's a great, hopeful message. Appreciate it.
Thank you.